I'm Shayna Lee, Senior Director of U.S. Communities at DataKind, and today we're going to reintroduce you to Beacon in case you weren't there at our first session last week. And more importantly, we're going to hear directly from a real user of the platform, one of our partners, Sarah Frymiller from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. They'll walk us through how they actually use Beacon and their day-to-day work. So here's the agenda for our time together. We'll start with the data challenge that we heard from many organizations and co-development partners when we created Beacon and what they're wrestling with. I'll introduce the platform and what it does. After that, I'm going to hand things over to Sarah, who will share their story and actually do some screen sharing of some of their live workflows within Beacon. We'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end for your questions, but feel free as you listen along to start dropping those questions into the Q&A icon on your Zoom screen. That's where we'll chat. And when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll be sure to answer those questions. We're also going to record and share the webinar afterwards. So, for anyone who is new to us, DataKind is a global nonprofit organization. Our mission is essentially to use data science and AI for positive social impact. What we do, we help empower mission-driven organizations with innovative and scalable products and solutions to help maximize their impact, streamline operations, and optimize resources. We've spent over 15 years partnering with those mission-driven organizations to ultimately help them use data more effectively. And so Beacon is one of our products. It was built specifically in mind to help community-serving organizations turn scattered, disconnected data into something that can be acted on with confidence. And so we're going to start with the problem that we heard a lot from organizations. I think it's something that a lot of you may recognize on this webinar. We've heard a lot that it's not necessarily lack of access to data. Most of the partners and organizations that we heard from shared the need to actually bring different data sets, disconnected data sets, how to bring those elements together in order to generate actionable community insights. And you can see a couple of examples on your screen. There could be a case where an organization, their caseload data lives within one's CRM tool, but the community context around it, for example, economic, housing, health conditions, lives somewhere else entirely. How do you bring that together for that shared view? We've also heard needs around understanding. Organizations know who they're serving, but what's much harder is understanding who's missing and where those in need are located in order to have that effective community outreach. We've also heard needs from collectives of partner organizations working together in the same community around a same issue, often can't easily find a common or see a common view of who needs what and where, so that everyone's operating with a partial picture of community need instead of that shared view. We've also heard needs around oftentimes reports may need to get built, as an example, for a grant application or a report. And oftentimes that happens and then it sits in a folder. That data doesn't go on to drive ongoing coordinated action. And so if you take a look at the graphic on the right, you can see economic data, census data, health data, housing, programming data, and more, all pouring in from different directions, different systems. Without something to connect them, what often comes out on the other end isn't insights. It ends up being noise, disconnected, siloed, incomplete data that can often lead to limited insights, unclear action, and even missed opportunities. So the core need being expressed is more around that fragmentation problem that's seen in data. And so I also wanted to share this to give insight into how DataKind arrived with the development of the Beacon platform. DataKind's earlier work involved building specific standalone tools within a specific domain. each one solving one narrow problem for one partner. And so Beacon really represents the next stage of the evolution. Instead of just separate standalone tools for just economic data or just housing data, we really aimed with Beacon to pull those multiple dimensions and domains together into a single view, uh, incorporating a community. And so the point of doing that wasn't just visualization for its own sake, it was really to get to that actionable insight, whether it's identifying access gaps, targeting outreach, enabling real collaboration, informing policy decisions, and more. And we built Beacon specifically for those organizations and people closest to the communities that they serve. This really means the opportunity to build this platform, for example, for community development organizations, community-based nonprofits, small business support providers, cross-sector partnerships that we often see within a community. So if your role involves figuring out where need is greatest in your community and how to respond to it, Beacon was designed with you in mind, not just exclusively for data teams, but also inclusive of practitioners. And so, at its core, Beacon is a platform that enables the ability to bring disconnected public and private data sets together for place-based mapping analysis towards those coordinated and actionable insight. It comes preloaded with 55 public data sources preloaded into Beacon from various domains. It's built to be inclusive of non-technical users, so you don't need to have an advanced GIS background or training, go through an extensive training. It also aims to support secure collaboration. So your organization and even the partners that you work with can come with the same shared evidence instead of duplicating efforts or working from different data sets or systems. There are three things that people using Beacon can do, especially those that deliver community programming and resources, and each one maps to a question that we hear a lot. So first, you'll see where your community is falling through or doesn't have enough support. The question that arises often is, where are we missing people? Beacon lets you identify communities across whatever public data you select all in one view. We also hear questions around being able to act with precision or confidence. What's driving the need in my community? You can layer then your own intake or caseload data, for example, on top of public local conditions and data to prioritize the communities that would need the most support. And third, enabling effective collaboration. The question often becomes, how do we get partners aligned? With Beacon, you can save and share your analysis with internal teams, partners, even funders using the same shared trusted data. So your evidence doesn't get built once and then lost. You'll notice how these three map directly back to the pain points we talked about a few slides ago. That's intentional, and Beacon was built to address those challenges. I want to spend a quick minute here because I know this is usually the first question on people's minds if you're thinking about uploading data. You can certainly use Beacon and use the platform initially with those public data sets. But if you're thinking about uploading data, we want to be able to share up front. You, as a user, own your own data. DataKind is a tool steward. We're not the data owner. Anything that you upload is only visible to people you explicitly give consent or access to. And when your data is uploaded, it defaults to owner-only view first. The data is encrypted at rest, essentially using industry standard security infrastructure, and you control exactly who sees what. There are three role levels. There's an ability to create teams and role levels within the platform. Those three role levels are team owner, contributor, and viewer. Also, a practical note, before uploading anything, we always like to encourage the removal of any PII or PHI information first. Only uploading with your analysis actually requires minimum data necessary, and review before you share with any teams if you do create one. Certainly, if you have specific questions about this, our team is available to help. Now, with that in mind, I'd love to introduce you to our guest today. Sarah Freimiller is a data specialist from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Uh, this organization provides free legal aid to low-income residents across the state. So, Sarah, I want to thank you for joining us today and share with us a little bit about how you use the platform.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a joy to be here because I love talking about Beacon to my fellow coworkers, people I meet. Just yesterday, I was working with one of our interns on part of the Beacon presentation that I'll share today. And my friend just walked up behind and kind of screamed and said, "Is that Beacon?" So it is gaining popularity at the organization. I think our social work team really loves it because it helps us see data on a kind of citywide and region-wide scale. And that's really exciting to be able to think intentionally about our data. And I think it's part of our move from looking at kind of data for data's sake or for kind of grant reporting to looking at actionable information and helping people see that like the information that they're putting into our system is something that they can later like analyze on their own steam. So yeah, as an organization, we provide holistic case support so people can sometimes work with a social worker as well as the lawyer or advocate on their case. And I think that's really helpful when we're thinking about putting people into a place where they don't need to access legal support repeatedly down the road. We also have a large number of housing, healthcare, consumer, family law, and public benefits cases. So today I'm going to focus a bit more on one of our healthcare programs, but yeah, we serve a number of different needs across an array of civil legal issues. So now I'm going to share Beacon. And as I mentioned, I was working on a specific project yesterday for this presentation. And then as Shayna was talking, I got excited about another idea and started entering data in the back end, but we'll see if that is usable for now. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what Beacon looks like. So this is oh, I'm not sharing yet. This is the kind of sign in page. And can I just get a verbal yes that you can see what I'm seeing right now?
Yes.
Great. So this is me logged in. This is the home page. They have been very responsive at DataKind about trying to create a tool that feels easier to use. They've been very responsive to ideas on how to do so. So I just want to shout the whole team out that I've worked with. So this is my homepage. I can see that I'm logged into my health and welfare team. And that's one of the cool things is that you can have different team options down here. So you can share different types of data with different groups. So people aren't like when we're talking about the signal and the noise, they're not seeing every single thing you've ever uploaded. It's really focused on the work that they're doing specifically. So yesterday I created a map, which I'm going to show you, and it looks at data for our Connecting Kids to Coverage program. So this is a program that helps families, youth, and pregnant people access Medicaid in Missouri. And they were really curious about the geographic spread of the cases that they've taken on over the last 4 years, as well as how that compared to uninsured rates in that region. So I'm going to go to my saved maps over here to the left. And don't worry, I'll show you how to upload as well. I'm going to go to the maps here. I can also see quickly looking at the map, oh, which indicators are selected for it. So that helps me make sure that I'm seeing the correct map. So going to the map. Mhm. All right. Depending on the load time, I may wait for the map to load, or I may just reconstruct it using the available data sources. All right, it's taking a bit of time, so I'm just going to do it from scratch. Let me go to map analysis, and I want to look at things on a zip code level. And this is important to our CKC team because they work with school districts. Those are a lot of their referral partners. So they wanted something that roughly mapped onto school district. So I'm going to look at my boundary-based, I think health. Yes. I have this available indicator, our CKC open cases from 2022 to 2025. So as soon as I click that, it should show me. Um, so our we have location turned off by our admins, so I have to type in the zip code to jump over to Missouri. But it's fun to sometimes get a tour of our country. So as you can see, immediately the map is filled out with the number of cases that they've taken on over those 4 years from each zip code. And as I hover over it, it actually tells me how many cases, as well as in the notes section, let me see if I can zoom a bit. Yeah, so you can see that this is Acton School District. This is St. Louis Public Schools. Up here we have Rittenhour. So I wanted to add those notes so this map could be even more useful to that program as they're thinking, okay, like what contacts do we have at these different school districts? Because outreaches are a big part of their role too and are part of their grant work. And so we have the existing case data for CKC. I'm going to scroll down a bit to our ranges. I think if I expand the range a bit, then like right now it's only showing cases in the 22 to 35 and up range, but if I include it all the way down to one, it gives us kind of more of an idea of everywhere that they've been taking cases. So we can see down here, we've got some additional cases in South County as well as North County. So our big concentrations appear to be in the North County and in these kind of southern zip codes in St. Louis City. All right, so now another thing they were curious about is like we see where we're doing these cases, but we want to know like what does access look like to health insurance in the first place? So I'm going to go to health. One of the very helpful existing metrics is the percent uninsured. So I'm going to click on health insurance uninsured here, and that overlays the map with that like measurement. So at first, I may not be quite sure how to read it, but Beacon has a very helpful legend down here. So if there are high rates of both cases and higher rates of uninsured individuals, we're going to see this kind of vibrant purple color. Um, that perfect mix. If things are very blue, but not very red, then it's going to be a higher number of cases and probably a lower percentage of uninsured people. But if something is looking pretty red, that means we've got a lot of uninsured individuals and families, but a relatively low number of cases. So if I come back up to the map here, and I'm really excited to talk with the team about this because they were asking for this information. So we cover a whole range of um, counties in eastern Missouri. So it's not just St. Louis. And I think it can be hard to get the information out to kind of like further reaches, but I think it will be really important for our team to see like, oh, it looks like there are high uninsurance rates in these areas, and we have not necessarily seen these cases coming in. For instance, if we look at this specific zip code where Pattonville is located, we'll see that they have an uninsured rate of 17%, and we've had 9 cases in the last 4 years. So that I think will be really interesting to look at, the different um, visual cues that our team can look at to say, oh, like maybe we want to think about like trying to reach out, have outreaches here, establish more partnerships so people know that they can continue sending these cases to us. So yeah, and I also want to shout out, our team is doing like important and hard work in other areas that are very high rates of uninsurance. So, it's a team of 3 people, but they've done so much to get people insured. They've taken on over 1,000 cases in these years. And so it's really amazing what they've done and continue to do. So I want to see this not just as like what are the needs that we're identifying, but also as like congratulations, you are doing great work in areas that have high uninsurance rates. Because if we take away the um, indicator of our cases, you can see that there is a pretty clear geographic component to like where people are underinsured, and that it's both kind of like northern and, as we were seeing, more in the southern area around St. Louis, but also the further out you get from the center, there are higher uninsurance rates in our kind of more rural counties. So it'll be good to be able to look at the whole map and say, we cover these areas. Do we want to work more with our Union and our Hannibal teams, which are our rural teams, to see who they think we should work with to make sure people know about our services? So speaking of collaboration, I'm going to show you how, sorry, I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions in the chat so far or any things that people want to ask in this moment?
Sarah, I'm taking a look in the Q&A section of the Zoom screen. Don't see any questions as of yet.
Alrighty, I'll move on to the next section, which will be creating an indicator. So you can go to upload data here. I am going to continue and lose my changes. Um, I think that the upload data is so exciting because it just gives you such a great way to put your information into context in a safe way, in a secure way with the existing publicly available data. And I think, too, what I'm excited about is creating these like resources that are available in an ongoing way so teams can do their own analysis and compare lots of different indicators that are publicly available with ones that are specific to their teams. So this is a great resource that we are just starting to tap into. So I'm going to actually upload some outreach data. And I was working on this morning. So um, you can see that I've added each zip code where Connecting Kids to Coverage had outreaches and including the number of total attendees in the different events that they had there. And in the notes section, I really wanted to let them know, oh, you met with this partner, was at this location, and you had this many attendees, as well as the year that it occurred in. So I think the data cleaning part of this took the longest. Creating an indicator on Beacon is much faster once you've got things kind of aggregated. And it is important to have things aggregated by your geographic indicator. That was one of my first lessons. So you are not going to upload a data set that just has, each row might have, like multiple rows might have the same zip code. Instead, you want to create like a pivot table or something that sums the number of indicator or the number of what you're trying to count by each individual zip code. So this is going to be a zip code, and it's pretty easy when it's a zip code because you just select your zip code, then you validate. So hooray! It automatically shows you your validated zip code information. This has been really helpful, especially when working on something more specific like a census tract, or not more specific, but more granular, because it showed me the census tracts that were not mapping into what Beacon needed. So it lets you know like where you need to clean your data, which is very helpful. Luckily, we have all of our zip codes look good to go. And for errors, the only one was the kind of sum or the total at the bottom of that table, which is fine. I don't need to include that because it's not actually a zip code. So I'm going to now click Map Indicators, and I'm going to create new indicators. I'm going to include the name, so I'm going to say CKC Outreaches. So that will let me know that I looked into their outreach data. I will say 2025. So it is a larger time span than just 2025, but I'm going to enter the last year of that data. Now I'm going to add the indicator name. So I'm going to make it, again, CKC Outreaches, but in this case, I'm going to say 2022 to 2025. So that way our team knows, oh, it's more than just 1 year of information. For the values, I'm interested in seeing the number of attendees per um, zip code, and then I also want to see them in integer form. For the category, so kind of how it's grouped, I think I would also like to have this under health. And for notes, this is the important part. This is why I had a notes column in my data set. I would love for them to be able to hover over it and see who they were working with and who their partner was for that outreach. And now I'm going to validate. Awesome. It looks like the geocoding worked for the zip codes, and I can upload this data set. And then I click Get Started. And again, I'm still in that health and welfare, at least I think. Oh, I'll click up here to make sure. Yes, I'm in the health and welfare team. So the indicator that I've created is available within that team, although I will need to share it as well. So I'm going to quickly do that. I'll go to my indicators, and you can see here that I've shared the number of open cases with the team, but I haven't shared the number of outreaches. And this is helpful for if you're still working on a data set, if you're testing things out. So you don't have to share it until you're ready to do so. And then you can also revoke the share if you only want it available for a certain amount of time. So now the people in this team should be able to see this data set and use it on their maps. So I will go back to map analysis and I will go to the zip code level and health, or this is going to be actually under uploaded data indicators. So I'm going to look at CKC outreaches, and I believe I will have to type in my handy zip code. Oop. Oh, that's not that. This is the search button. All right. And I will zoom out a bit. Okay. So I'm going to, it looks like it's kind of centered around the middle of the range, but I'm going to really expand the number of attendees so we can see the full range. Awesome. So it looks like what we have are a number of outreaches that occurred in 63136 and oh, right, this must be where I didn't finish my data. But you can see if I hover over this, oh, it looks like we had 65 attendees at a back to school fair in 2024. Or here we had events in 2023 and 2024, and we had 400 attendees. So we're really seeing a lot of people at those locations. So yeah. And then if they also wanted to see, okay, how are our outreaches comparing to the number of cases we're taking? I'm just going to cancel that for visibility. I'm going to zoom out a bit. We can also overlay opened cases. And if we scroll down to look at the legend, you can see purple is where we have attendees from our outreaches as well as open cases. Red would be maybe where we're opening a lot of cases, but we don't have as many outreach attendees. And blue would be a lot of attendees, but not a lot of cases. So again, very concentrated in North City. We're seeing like a lot of cases taken from this region, you can see, but we haven't necessarily had a lot of attendees there. You can see, for example, for 63301, we have no outreaches like in that data set, but we've taken on 27 cases. And we can see also the school district that we'd be working with. So it'd be St. Charles, RB1, and Orchard Farm School District would cover that zip code. So I'm really excited to share this with the team because you can see how it's not just the available data that we're able to look at and overlay, so like the publicly available data, but it also gives people so much more ownership over their internal data sources. And I think they'll be able to see too, oh, if I'm able to enter the details about this outreach in a certain way, I can get more kind of information from the ultimate map that results from that. So at this point, I'm going to jump back to our webinar. So I'm probably going to stop sharing. Woohoo. And Shayna, if you don't mind going to the next slide, that would be lovely. Or if we have comments in the chat, I'm happy to answer any questions that came up. Aha. Greg is asking about the food access data and where it comes from. And I think I'm going to leave that to Shayna for after this next slide. So I'm going to jump into this. Or actually, Shayna, do you want to answer that now before I jump in?
Yeah, I can quickly answer. Also put it in the chat. We do have a data dictionary source. So in that specific question, the data did come from the USDA. We update those data sources on a quarterly basis, but as a part of the platform, we do have a data dictionary. So you can look at any of our public data available and be able to track that back to the source.
Yes, and I have downloaded that before for one of our metrics and found it helpful. All right, so next steps with Beacon. I'm excited to look into various questions. I think one of the big main uses that I'm seeing for it in the coming year is that we are holding a needs assessment and we're looking at many different factors over our geographic regions to see kind of points of intervention where we might need to provide additional like support in terms of outreach, in terms of partnerships, and like meeting specific client needs with different types of cases. And I think Beacon is a great way to have like a central visual point for our teams when we're talking about what they need. For example, talking with our rural offices, um, they have told me it's hard to know like where people are located who might benefit the most from our services. They have to do so much driving in a given week that they really need to be intentional about, where they're showing up and who they're working with. And so I think having this kind of drilled down analysis by not just county, not just zip code, but also even census tract could say, help them when it comes to identifying like, oh, like these are specific populations that would really benefit from knowing about our services because they're facing like the highest eviction rates in the surrounding areas. And then also like the people who qualify in the first place. So Beacon does have indicators that show, below poverty level. And I think that's a good general indicator that these people would probably qualify for legal aid. We can also think about specific to our health and welfare program, so like public benefits cases, where are people who have children living who may not be, we may not have as many cases in those areas. Because it may be that we, again, reach out to schools and to other partners in those areas to let them know about our services and to try to get the word out. Also, I appreciate that, Shayna, the hovering over. Um, we've been, we are going to go through a kind of like intake revamp, and we're thinking intentionally about, how generally people access our services and those geographic areas where that access is lower compared to what we might expect. And what we can do to like edit our website, to get in touch with people in the region, to make sure that our pro se resources are available and searchable, so that we can have just kind of more information out there. So even if people aren't able to make it all the way to having a case opened with us, that there is regional support for the type of need that they have. I've talked a lot about coordinating with partner organizations, and I think that is going to be an ongoing question that people have with Beacon is, well, like where is the need and who exists there, who's already working with these individuals and with these populations. And I think it'll help us be more creative about like, oh, what relationships do we need to work on? For example, our family law program, Lasting Solutions, like one of their big goals in the coming months is to expand into the county. And so we've started kind of looking at collaboration partners who work with immigrants who are survivors of domestic violence in our counties. And so domestic violence is not like an indicator on Beacon, but I think looking at kind of income levels, looking at housing access, we can also look at things that would make life a bit more precarious for those individuals experiencing that. And then finally, internal capacity. This is something that we're already working on, but I'm having a training tomorrow to talk about and demo how people can have their own teams and how they can have their own workspaces and request data sets from me so that they can have these indicators that they can work on themselves. And so they can build out their kind of observations, they can have additional questions, and they can identify like next steps based on kind of the gaps, but also based on the existing strengths that they identify in the work that they're doing. So many, many, many uses. I'm really excited about it, and I think it's a tool that I'm just so glad that I witnessed it at a conference. It was maybe like a year and a half ago. I just remember that someone demoed Beacon and they showed the percent of populations that were eligible for SNAP in the area, and I immediately thought of our public benefits team and the work that they do. And so that was one of my first analyses was based on that. But it's just come so far and has expanded in so many ways since then. And I'm just excited for the oncoming work that we're going to do with Beacon. And I yield the floor.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it. And we'll get to Q&A in just a moment, but just want to be able to acknowledge, really appreciated seeing the journey from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri with how they provide support within their community and just recognizing this is just one lens on this or one example in terms of how Beacon is being leveraged. It's also being used across other range of sectors and analysis questions and want to share with you some examples that we've seen as evident on the screen. So we've seen cases within community development where a program manager may layer economic indicators with lender or programmatic data to identify where there's opportunities for local investment. Small business support organizations identifying zip codes with a high density of under-resourced small businesses, low access to capital, how to think about targeting outreach there. Within housing, we recognize that while there's public data, there's also value in the hyper-local housing data that may be available in one's community, like cost burden, to help build collective housing solutions with partners. Philanthropy, using platform insights to inform how and where to deploy grant funding and to build capacity across a portfolio. Also within health, understanding area-specific impact of interventions on health outcomes. So those are just a couple of examples in which we've either heard analysis questions from partners or those that are actively using Beacon to uncover those insights. So with that in mind, we are now at our Q&A portion. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And I see, Sarah, you may be typing an answer there already. There's two in the queue. But would love your perspective as an example. How do you think about quality from federal data sources? I know initially I mentioned with the platform, we have our data dictionary where we commit to updating overall our public data sources. But is there anything you'd like to add from your perspective in terms of how you think about data quality from a federal data source or even others that you may encounter?
I mean, I think one of the first questions I ask people and ask myself when we're looking at one of these maps is like, what potential weaknesses do you see in how this was developed? Because if one of the things I've been thinking about is, we look at the number of cases, but we don't look at the population of that zip code. So I think if we were to, or the population of eligible clients. So I think if I were to have a more robust figure to map, it would actually be the number of cases out of the number of eligible people in that zip code. And so it would be a percentage instead of a pure number. And so it's kind of like an almost impressionistic map every time because, it doesn't tell the whole story. And I don't think I would take like any number from the map and say, oh, I'm going to be taking like X action based on this. Because I think there are qualifiers that we need before we directly translate to action. But I think like even with our outreach data, it might be that someone tells me like, oh, we're missing outreaches that weren't tagged as our program, but that I attended and that I told people about our program at. So that was not an incredibly helpful answer, maybe, but you always have to think about, you know, the validity of the data source in terms of like, what am I going to be using it for? If it's good enough, I think it can still get us along the road to actionable information. If you're using it as like a sole source that will determine like a big, I don't know, ethical issue, maybe don't. But that's my initial take on that question.
No, I appreciate that, Sarah. And I think that's why we've also heard a need, particularly when there are organizations working on a shared issue, right? That I think is also part of the journey of where there could be an opportunity to bring data sources together that partners have that perspective on, see what that collective view looks like, and see what types of conversations or actions stem from that. So appreciate your thoughts on that, Sarah. There's another good question around data cleaning as it relates to Beacon. So sharing your thoughts on how much cleaning you've had to do before importing data versus elements that Beacon helps with. Yeah.
Yeah, all of the cleaning I do outside of Beacon. So I will do that in Excel, just personally. And there are other the thing about it too is that it has been growing my Excel skills and my legal server skills, which is the database that we use, because it's driving me to use the data in different ways. For example, I was looking at evictions by census tract, and I was realizing that it's a lot more granular than by zip code, and it will show you for example, when I was looking at eviction lab data, like census tracts that had a higher percentage, like a population who was Black had higher eviction rates in St. Louis than ones where the majority were white. And so I was like, oh, I want to look at census tract data for our own cases. But when I was doing that, it took a long time to get it in the format that Beacon needed. And so I actually reached out to the admin team at Legal Server and said, is there any way that we can change or I can edit the lookup list? And they helped me make a report that automatically just contains the formatting that Beacon needs. And so that was really helpful. They did it so quickly. But now I've got census tract data on like all of our cases, where before it was like an incomplete, for my use, data source, and I wasn't really using it in analysis. In general, it depends on like how much information you're trying to fit in the notes, maybe too. Um, and address data, if you have it in different fields, that's really helpful. If you have one field that contains the entire address, that can lead to a lot more difficult data cleanup and validation. So I think I'm still figuring out how to best kind of source our data internally so that it maps into Beacon more easily.
Thank you for that response, Sarah. Let's see if anyone has additional questions. What I'll do as a friendly reminder in case folks are thinking through questions, let me see if I can exit out here. What I'll do is I'll go to the platform just to share in case some of you had not been a part of the first webinar. Just want to highlight a couple of areas and resources that you may find helpful. So this is the data dictionary. There's links along the bottom here where you can find out where those sources are. We have an FAQ as well and a getting started page that I'd love to also share with you all. So if you're just started, we have a demo embedded and we also have step-by-step guidelines. So Sarah certainly did great walking us through the specific workflows there. But also, if you need additional guidance or support, we do have those guides available as well. So just wanted to mention that to people as well. And let's see, it looks like there may be other questions popping in. Let's take a look. Oh, just a thanks, Sarah, for providing insights there. Really appreciating that. Okay. We'll give a moment to see if there's other questions that come up. But in the meantime, I shared with you some of the resources that are available on the platform. You can sign up for a free account. Explorebeacon.org is the account. If you know of someone who would be interested in attending our next session, which will be next Wednesday, that session will actually focus a little bit more on cross-sector partnerships and what that journey has looked like in relation to Beacon. So really excited to hear from a guest speaker that will share their experience. We also have the registration link for those that haven't yet signed up. They're welcome to. I will send a copy of the recording to everyone, so you'll have that as well. And speaking of collaboratively, good questions. Oh, yes, a great question. Interest in hearing more about experience working collaboratively with Beacon. Sarah, any thoughts you want to have? Because I think it depends on level of collaboration. I think in your case, it was more internal, so you're welcome to talk a little bit about that. Next week's session, we'll talk more about cross-organization or cross-sector collaboration. So, Sarah, anything you'd like to offer, at least from an internal collaborative perspective?
Yeah, I think internally, um, that's been where most of our collaboration has been. So like across teams, maybe. We have had, I think, one request from our housing program that one of the alders wanted to know how many evictions had been happening in their ward. And so we don't have ward data, but I was able to get a map by zip code and kind of look and share with that alder. Oh, like this is how many evictions cases we've taken on per zip code and in your specific kind of ward area. And so that was one of the most recent, maybe like the only external collaboration we've had so far. And so I just added that person as a viewer. And I don't know if they actually looked at the map, but hypothetically they do have access. And I will say for internal collaboration, it is, I think, very easy for people to create an account and get going. Like I shared our housing team with several interns in the consumer program and walked over to say hi later in the day, and one of them was already looking at utility rates or utility kind of threats in the region. And so it was cool to see like, oh yeah, they're getting started right away. They don't necessarily need me, but I think it's good to also provide that training so people can have a bit more reassurance that, what they're doing is cool. They can save maps, they can talk about it internally, and then when we're ready, we can have kind of more intentional outward collaboration as well.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And excited to share more next week when we look at cross-sector collaboration, because I think that also brings up an interesting journey when looking at aligning across data indicators, governance, sharing, things of that nature. But appreciate, Sarah, also you highlighting like how that's looked across different teams in to also help break down those silos that may be within one's own organization or foster that collaboration. So with that in mind, to Sarah's point, certainly for those that are ready to jump in and explore Beacon, we won't hold you, but also if you are interested in gaining additional support or connecting with us at DataKind, our email address is there. We're happy to have conversations around where there could be a helpful use case that Beacon will help with. We'll again have our next session next Wednesday at the same time, and I'll be sure to send the recording. I want to thank again Sarah so much for sharing your journey and the great work that Legal Services of Eastern Missouri is doing. It was really interesting to see what types of questions and insights already just sort of creating that conversation and connection with your colleagues. So thank you all so much for joining us as well, and stay tuned. We'll be looking forward to sharing the recording with you.